What if the greatest limitation in your life is not your circumstances, not your past, not your weakness, but your understanding of Allah? What if the doors you believe are sealed forever are in reality only waiting for one sincere, one moment of true surrender, one heartbeat of absolute trust in Allah? Today, we are not here to talk about hope as a feeling. We are here to awaken yaqeen, unshakable certainty, that nothing, absolutely nothing, is impossible for Allah. My dear brothers and sisters, we live in a world that constantly teaches us limits. From the moment we are young, we are told what we can and cannot do, what is realistic, what is achievable, and what is impossible. Over time, these limits do not remain outside of us. They settle deep within our hearts. And slowly, without realizing it, we begin to project our own weakness onto Allah. We begin to believe that because we are incapable, our dua is too much, our situation is too broken, and our pain is too complicated. But Allah declares clearly and powerfully in the Quran, indeed Allah is over all things competent. Nothing is impossible for Allah, not your healing, not your child's guidance, not the restoration of your marriage, not the forgiveness of your sins, and not the opening of doors you thought were permanently closed. One of the greatest spiritual illnesses of the heart is not disbelief, but underestimating Allah. We believe in Him, yet we place limits on what He can do. We say, we trust Allah, but only within the boundaries of what we have seen, experienced, or understood. And this is where faith weakens, not because Allah's power decreases, but because our certainty does. Dr. Haifaa Younis often reminds us that the heart must be trained to recognize Allah not through emotions, but through knowledge and yaqeen. When you truly know Allah, despair has no place in your heart. Look at the stories Allah Himself chose to preserve in the Quran. A sea does not normally split, but it split. Fire does not normally cool, but it cooled. A child is not born without a father, but he was born. A barren woman does not normally conceive, but she did. Why? Because Allah is not governed by laws. He is the one who created them. When Allah wills something, He does not need time, process, or explanation. He only says, be, and it is, my dear sister, my dear brother, your situation is not unique to Allah. Your tears are not heavy upon Him. Your repeated dua does not tire Him. In fact, Allah loves to be asked. He loves when His servant comes broken, humbled and certain that only Allah can fix what the world failed to fix. The problem is not that Allah delays, the problem is that we sometimes give up before witnessing His wisdom. We want immediate relief, but Allah wants eternal transformation. He is not just changing your situation, He is rebuilding your heart. When the heart fully surrenders to Allah, miracles stop being surprising. You stop asking how and start trusting who. You stop calculating outcomes and start relying on divine wisdom. This is why true tawakkul is an passive. It is an act of worship. It is declaring with your heart and actions, Ya Allah, I have done my part and I trust You with what I cannot do. And Allah never disappoints a heart that truly relies on Him. So today, before you leave this reminder, ask yourself, have I been limiting Allah by my fear? Have I been shrinking my dua to protect myself from disappointment? Have I mistaken I for denial? Remember this, Allah's timing is not punishment, and His silence is not absence. He is working even when you cannot see it. He is preparing you even when you feel forgotten. Raise your expectations, not of people, not of life, but of Allah. Because when Allah is in the equation, the impossible is no longer impossible. It is only a matter of time, wisdom, and divine mercy. And Allah, each is never late. Nothing is impossible for Allah. And the heart that truly believes this will never be broken beyond repair. One of the greatest misconceptions that silently weakens our faith is the belief that human limitations somehow apply to Allah. We live in bodies that tire, minds that forget, and hearts that waver, so we unconsciously assume that what overwhelms us must also be overwhelming in the sight of Allah. This is not disbelief, but it is a subtle spiritual imbalance, measuring the Creator by the weakness of the creation. Islam comes to liberate the heart from this illusion and to realign our understanding of who Allah truly is. Human beings are created with limits by design. We have limits in strength, knowledge, patience, time, and emotional capacity. Allah reminds us in the Quran that mankind was created weak. This weakness is not a flaw, it is a reminder. It is meant to push us toward humility and dependence on Allah, not to despair. The danger arises when we allow this weakness to define our expectations of Allah Himself. When a problem feels too big, a sin feels too heavy, or a situation feels beyond repair, we are not describing Allah's ability, we are describing our own. Divine power is not an extension of human capability. Allah does not operate within the laws He created for us. He is not restricted by time, probability, medical diagnosis, financial logic, or social norms. What we call impossible is simply what we have never witnessed or cannot imagine. But Allah is Al-Qadir, the one whose power has no beginning and no end. For Him, creating the heavens and the earth is no more difficult than restoring a broken heart or changing a single moment in your life. This is why the Quran constantly invites believers to reflect, not on their problems, but on Allah's names and attributes. When Allah introduces Himself as Al-Qawi, the all-powerful, Al-Aziz, the almighty, and Al-Qadir, the fully capable, He is teaching us where our focus should be. Faith weakens not because problems grow, but because our awareness of Allah shrinks. The heart that truly knows Allah cannot remain imprisoned by fear, because it understands that no circumstance is greater than the one who controls it. Consider how often we say, I tried everything, as if that statement marks the end of hope. In reality, when human effort reaches its limit, that is often where divine intervention begins. Allah allows us to exhaust our own strength so that we may finally witness His. This is not humiliation, it is mercy. Allah wants the heart to detach from self-reliance and reconnect with reliance on Him. When that shift occurs, the same problem that once crushed you becomes the means through which you grow closer to Allah. The stories of the Prophet. ETs are powerful precisely because they break human logic. A prophet thrown into fire survives without harm. A prophet stands before the sea with an army behind him, and instead of panic, he says with certainty, indeed, my Lord is with me, He will guide me. A prophet is swallowed by a whale in the depths of darkness, yet a single sincere supplication brings him back to the surface of life. These stories are not historical entertainment. They are lessons in belief. They teach us that when all human solutions disappear, Allah's power becomes most visible. One of the most damaging habits of the heart is predicting Allah's response based on past experiences. We say, I made dua before and nothing changed, or I have been patient for years, so this must be my destiny. But Allah is not bound by your timeline, nor does He repeat His gifts in the same way twice. Every delay carries wisdom, and every unanswered prayer is either being stored, redirected, or transformed into protection. When you understand this, you stop seeing delay as rejection and start seeing it as divine planning beyond your vision. Dr. Haifaa Younis often emphasizes that certainty in Allah is not emotional optimism. It is intellectual and spiritual clarity. It is knowing without doubt that Allah's power is not affected by your mistakes, your weakness, or your confusion. The heart that truly believes this stops negotiating with Allah and starts surrendering to Him. And surrender is not giving up. It is placing your trust in the one who never fails. When we understand that human limits do not define divine peace, our relationship with Allah changes completely. Dua becomes bold, not hesitant. Hope becomes steady, not fragile. Trials become pathways, not dead ends. We stop asking, is this possible? And instead ask, what is Allah teaching me through this? Because the believer knows that if Allah wills something, no force in the heavens or the earth can stop it. And if He does not will it, no amount of human effort can force it. So do not measure Allah by your fear, your past, or your pain. Measure your pain by the greatness of Allah. Lift your heart beyond what you see and anchor it in what Allah has promised. Because the moment you truly internalize that human limits do not define divine power, the impossible loses its grip on your heart. And faith takes its rightful place, one of the most powerful yet misunderstood concepts in Islam is yaqin, certainty in Allah. Certainty is not simply believing that Allah exists or that He is capable of all things. True certainty is a deep, settled conviction in the heart that Allah is actively involved in your life, fully aware of your pain, and perfectly in control of every outcome. When this certainty takes root, despair has no place to survive. It may knock on the door of the heart, but it cannot stay. And it is this certainty that transforms moments of hopelessness into pathways for miracles. Despair does not usually enter the heart suddenly. It grows quietly over time through repeated disappointments, unanswered prayers, and prolonged trials. A person may continue to pray, to worship, and to appear strong on the outside while internally feeling exhausted and unseen. This is where certainty is tested, not when life is easy, but when hope feels fragile. Allah warns us in the Quran not to despair of His mercy, because despair is not just an emotional state. It is a reflection of how we perceive Allah. When despair settles in the heart, it is often because the heart has begun to doubt Allah's wisdom, timing, or care. Cert. Auntie and in-law redefines how we interpret pain. Instead of seeing hardship as abandonment, the believer with yaqeen sees it as divine attention. Allah does not test hearts He has forgotten. He tests hearts He is refining. This understanding alone shifts the emotional weight of a trial. The pain may still exist, but it no longer crushes the soul. The believer begins to trust that every tear is count. Every dubugayun is heard, and every delay carries a purpose beyond human comprehension. The Quran repeatedly links miracles not to ease, but to certainty. When Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ was thrown into the fire, the miracle did not occur because the fire lost its nature. It occurred because Allah commanded it to be cool and safe. But before that command came, Ibrahim's heart was already firm in certainty. When asked if he needed help, his response reflected complete reliance on Allah alone. That level of yaqeen is what invites divine intervention. Miracles are not random events. They are manifestations of Allah's power revealed at moments when human dependence dissolves and divine reliance takes over. Certainty does not mean the absence of fear or sadness. Even the prophets felt sorrow and worry. Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam cried until he lost his sight, yet he never lost his certainty in Allah. He said, I only complain of my sorrow and grief to Allah. This is the essence of yaqeen, taking your broken heart to Allah without questioning His decree. Certainty allows a believer to grieve without losing faith, to struggle without surrendering to hopelessness, and to wait without doubt. In Allah's promise, one of the most transformative aspects of certainty is how it reshapes dua. A person who lacks certainty asks timidly, expecting disappointment, but a heart filled with yaqeen asks with confidence. Not because it demands a specific outcome, but because it trusts Allah's choice over its own. The Prophet taught us that dua is always answered, either by granting what was as ked, by delaying it for a better time, or by averting harm. Certainty means believing in all three outcomes as mercy, not punishment. Despair often comes from focusing too much on how something will happen instead of who is in control. We calculate possibilities, analyze obstacles, and exhaust ourselves with what-ifs. Certainty frees the heart from this burden. It teaches the believer that Allah does not need the right conditions to create the right outcome. He creates ease from hardship, life from despair, and light from darkness. When certainty settles in the heart, the believer stops trying to control the process and starts trusting the planner. Dr. Haifaa Younis often emphasizes that yaqeen is built through knowing Allah, through His names, His promises, and His past actions in our life. When you reflect on how Allah carried you through previous hardships, healed you in unseen ways, or protected you without your knowledge, certainty grows naturally. The heart begins to recognize a pattern of divine care that was always present, even when it was unnoticed. This awareness transforms despair into gratitude and fear into surrender. Miracles, in the Islamic understanding, are not always dramatic events witnessed by others. Sometimes the miracle is internal. It is the sudden peace in the middle of chaos, the strength to continue when you feel depleted, or the clarity to walk away from what harms you. These are miracles of the heart, quiet, profound transformations that only Allah can create. And they are often the result of certainty that refuses to let despair take root. Hence, certainty in Allah becomes firm, despair loses its authority over the heart. The believer learns to say, even in the darkest moments, Allah is enough for me, and He is the best disposer of affairs. This statement is not passive resignation, it is a declaration of trust. It is acknowledging that while you may not see the way forward, Allah already has it written. So if you find yourself standing at the edge of hopelessness, know that this may be the very place where miracles are born. Strengthen your certainty, not by denying your pain, but by anchoring your heart in Allah's promises. Because when the heart truly believes in Allah's wisdom, mercy, and power, despair does not get the final word, Allah does. One of the most misunderstood concepts in faith is surrender. Many people associate surrender with weakness, defeat, or giving up. In Islam, however, surrender is the highest form of strength. It is the moment the heart stops resisting Allah's decree and begins trusting His wisdom. True surrender, taslim, is not passive resignation. It is an active, conscious decision to place one's heart entirely in the care of Allah. And when this level of surrender is achieved, what once seemed impossible begins to unfold with divine precision. The heart is the center of belief, intention, and reliance. As long as the heart is divided, partly trusting Allah and partly clinging to its own control, it remains restless. This inner struggle is often the source of anxiety, exhaustion, and spiritual confusion. We pray, yet we worry. We make dua, yet we calculate outcomes. We say, I true, Saint Allah, yet our hearts are tied to specific results. Surrender begins when the heart releases this tension and accepts that Allah's plan is better than any plan it could design. Allah does not ask us to understand His decree, He asks us to trust it. Understanding comes later, often after the trial has passed. Surrender is choosing obedience and trust even when clarity is absent. This is why the Quran praises those who say, we hear and we obey. They do not say, we hear and we agree, or we hear and we understand. They submit their hearts before their circumstances make sense. This submission is what opens the door to divine assistance. When the heart truly surrenders, it stops placing conditions on faith. It no longer says, I will trust Allah if things improve, or I will be content once. The pain ends. Instead, it declares, I trust Allah because He is Allah. This shift is transformative. It frees the believer from emotional bargaining and replaces it with spiritual stability. The heart becomes anchored, not in outcomes, but in the certainty that Allah is always good, always just, and always merciful. The stories of the prophets beautifully illustrate this principle. When Maryam alayhi salam found herself alone, afraid, and facing accusation, she could not defend against, she did not argue or justify herself. She surrendered completely to Allah's command and remained silent. Her surrender allowed Allah to speak on her behalf through a miracle no human effort could produce. The impossible did not happen because she fought for control. It happened because she entrusted our honor entirely to Allah. Similarly, when Prophet Musa alayhi salam stood before the sea with no visible escape, surrender preceded the miracle. Allah did not part the sea while Musa was still questioning the outcome. The command came after Musa moved forward in obedience, despite the impossibility before him, which teaches us a powerful lesson. Divine openings often come after surrender, not before it. Allah wants to see the heart walk toward Him, even when the path is unclear. Surrender also transforms how we experience hardship. The trial may remain, but its weight changes. A surrendered heart does not ask, why me, but asks, what is Allah teaching me? This perspective shift does not remove pain, it removes bitterness. The heart begins to see hardship as a means of purification rather than punishment. And when the heart is purified, it becomes a vessel ready to receive divine gifts. One of the greatest obstacles to surrender is fear. fear of loss, fear of disappointment, fear of letting go. We hold tightly to what we know, even when it hurts, because uncertainty feels threatening. Surrender requires courage. It requires trusting Allah with what matters most to us, our loved ones, our future, our dreams. And Allah never asks for this trust to take from us. He asks for it to give us what is better, even if better does not look like what we imagined. Dr. Haifaa Younis often emphasizes that surrender is a daily act of worship. It is renewed every time the heart chooses faith over panic, patience over complaint, and trust over control. This is why surrender brings peace. Not because problems disappear, but because the heart is no longer fighting Allah's decree. The believer learns to say, Ya Allah, I place my affair entirely in your hands and truly mean it. When surrender becomes sincere, the impossible becomes inevitable. Not because the believer demands miracles, but because Allah responds to hearts that rely fully on Him. Sometimes the miracle is external. A door opens, a situation changes, a prayer is answered in ways beyond expectation. And sometimes the miracle is internal. Strength replaces fear, peace replaces anxiety, and contentment replaces restlessness. Both are gifts from Allah, and both are signs of His mercy. Ultimately, surrender is the essence of Islam itself. The word Islam means submission, placing one's heart, will, and trust in Allah alone. When the heart fully embraces this truth, it stops struggling against destiny and starts walking with it. And in that walk, guided by divine wisdom, the impossible does not just become possible, it becomes inevitable by the permission of Allah.